And hello, Internet. Hi, everybody. My name's Evan Jones. I am the host here today for Pursuery.com's Pirate Radio FM transmitter Geek Out. Just setting up some tech stuff. Apologize for the slightly late start, but we had a lot of wires and cables and miniature radios and boardrooms and other people and Raspberry Pis to set up. It's a pretty exciting day here. We're really excited about finally getting this underway. Trying to turn on my lower third. There you are. You can finally read my name. If you have any questions, you can tweet us at Pursuery, as you see here. And this is going to our YouTube channel later, so you can watch it on YouTube as well. We're going to include some links and some images and some screenshots because it's a little involved today, but trust me, this is really, really cool stuff. And today we are going to take, Mr. Victor, could I borrow your box, please? We're going to take one of these, and a big thank you for Victor for hanging out today. He's off camera, but we'll get him in here somehow. Hello. We're going to take Raspberry Pi. I have a slightly older model, and you have...
this is the B+.
The B+, that's the new heat.
Yeah, the one with the mini SD card.
Yeah, that is a mini SD card. I'm still using the SD cards, but the brand new model just came out, uses a mini SD card. But we're going to take this and combine it with a homemade antenna and is operating system? Can we call it a full-fledged operating system?
Yeah.
Yeah, and an operating system that is available at makezine.com, which we'll obviously be linking. Put it onto here and combine it with the Pi to turn into a small FM radio transmitter. I built this out at my house this week as a test, and it is a lot of fun. Lots of really cool stuff, and only requires a minimal amount of setup and just a little know-how. So we're going to go ahead and work through that today, and the whole point being that you can take your Raspberry Pi and make it into even a portable FM transmitter. And with that said, as I've mentioned, FM transmissions and the like in the United States being regulated by the FCC, please check. The FCC's after us, y'all.
No.
Every time we're on a Geek Out, it's like, hey, here's the important part. It's a little wild in the studio today. With that said, I'd like to note that the FCC in the United States of America regulates the radio airwaves, and that this is not a really powerful broadcast tool, but you are transmitting FM waves, so please use it responsibly. Make sure you're not interfering with important signals, emergency signals, aviation stuff, et cetera, they're being broadcast as it is. Important to check out first, so just check where you're scanning on the radio, and we'll get into a bit more of that in a bit. So anyway, we've done a few alterations to the guide that you're going to see on Pursuery.com to make this process a little bit faster. Again, I mentioned I built it out earlier in the week, and a few things take a decent amount of time. Today, one important thing that we're not going to actually get to do live, but we will document, and we have documented, is flashing an SD card. And when you're flashing an SD card, you're basically getting it to the point where you can put the operating system that you'll be using on your Pi on the card, because it takes the operating system from here. It's one of the cool things about the Raspberry Pi. You can have a mini computer that has a whole bunch of different little operating systems, and you're just putting them on a card. You're not having to reformat the entire computer the entire time, because it's pulling from here. Of course, Victor's is smaller and cooler because he's got the mini SD cards now, but I has the jelly. But as we sit around this absurdly large table in a boardroom, and we are in an absurdly large room today, we actually had the interesting other side of it is where we've got to kind of move our shots around to get everything on there. But I've got my Pi sitting here, I have my card ready to go here, and I have my homemade antenna here. But those are kind of the end results. Let's break down what exactly you need to get started. So you're going to need the following, and this is all listed out: a Raspberry Pi, a power unit that puts out at least 1.2 amps. I'm using one that, yeah, this one here puts out 1.2 amps. That's really important to supply the Pi with the power that it needs. It's going to come from a mini USB cable. And please just Google up Raspberry Pi power unit. You'll get a bevy of options to choose from. A small section of wire, we used 45 AWG wire. We were told to make it as long as 75 centimeters, but here's the thing. This is my end result antenna here. That's not 75 centimeters because when I got it to that size, it fell over So anyway, it's there we go. But like at one point, somebody was saying, "Oh, you can have this many inches as well." And I just tried this little one as a test, and it worked perfectly. Again, we're not trying to broadcast and compete with commercial or emergency radio signals, so there you go. The antenna was actually the hardest part of the build for me. And that said, we are also going to need, and this is an interesting thing to Google up, and you'll get results from Amazon, et cetera, and a bunch of electronic stores. You may probably be able to grab them just from Radio Shack as well. A female-to-female jumper, and we're going to use this to attach our Pi antenna to the GPIO section, the pins on our Pi. I'll show you how to do that. There's a fancy term for this that I'm going to reference my copious notes and look up for. Yeah, GPIO stands for General Purpose Input Output, and according to Wikipedia, I thought this was so cool that I'm reading Wikipedia on a Pursuitery Geek Out. General Purpose Input Output is a generic pin on an integrated circuit whose behavior, including whether it is an input or an output pin, can be controlled by the user at runtime. So if you've already learned something here, it's that GPIOs are pretty cool. But we'll be attaching this homemade antenna with the end of a female-to-female jumper. This little slot is going to click right on our Raspberry Pi, and after we get it up and running with the SD card in it, we're going to be able to broadcast radio. So the next thing on that list is a blank 8 GB SD card. You're also going to need some software to flash the card. Now, this is where it gets into your operating system. For instance, I'm on a Mac here, and I use something called PyFiller, which I'm going to link to in the notes. PyFiller is very easy to use. It's the same reason I used Noobs last week, because it's kind of hard to mess up. There are other systems you can use if you're using a Windows box. And again, we'll have links to not only these pieces of software, but there'll be tutorials about them. If you're using a Windows machine, you can, I think it's a disk imaging utility, I forgot the name of it, that's available for it as well to use, and that will flash your SD card and like with the image on it, so you can have a functioning OS for your player. And you're obviously, with that said, going to need a computer to flash your SD card and format it and put music on it. And last but not least, a radio receiver of some kind. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, we actually had to search around to find a small radio. We had all this other stuff in copious amounts, including 40 some odd jumper cables. I'm never going to use these. We're going to make friendship bracelets for Pursuitery fans. But we had to like search around, and finally we were saved by one of our engineers who's like, "Oh yeah, I have a shortwave radio to bring in." So after I get done this geek out and everything works, I'm going to go downstairs and listen to the BBC for a couple hours. But there you go. That's the parts list, and again, that's posted on the Pursuitery Geek Out page, and I'll include it on the YouTube notes as well. I've already made my note that you may have issues broadcasting due to a number of factors, including signal strength, and you need to observe proper FCC regulations about broadcasting, so please do check where you're outputting your signal and make sure it doesn't conflict with any existing broadcasts or transmissions, especially aviation or emergency signals. The usable FM range of your Raspberry Pirate radio will typically range between 87.5 megahertz and 108 megahertz. Again, they'll be on the range of your FM band, and your mileage may vary due to a number of factors, including some interesting stuff that is a bit beyond the scope of this Geek Out today regarding electrical engineering and radio broadcasting and how things travel through the air. But it's interesting stuff to mess with, and there we go. Anyway, with that long intro out of the way, one of the longer intros we've had recently because there's a lot of stuff happening here, we're going to build out the antenna first. So I am going to run over and grab an antenna cable. Come on, for my bag of tricks. This was the original, antenna cable size and length we were told to use. But the problem about this is when you attach to the Pi, it does this. So after I almost put out my eye a couple times with it, I'm kidding, I just scratched my cheek, I went ahead and cut one down to about that long, and it worked just fine. So I think I'm going to do the same thing again here with this one. This is 14 AWG This is really interesting. 14 AWG, MTW, or THN or THWN, gasoline and oil resistant cable. Like there's this long, you can sort of see it printed there, long bit of information about everything about this particular type of cable. The takeaway is that this worked just fine for our Raspberry Pi transmitter. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut this. Forget enough of it, that's long enough. And just cutting this with some, this is actually some household scissors I believe we have at the office. It takes a bit of, you got to strip this, there you go, as it flies out. It takes a little bit of force there. And now the real issue here is I don't have wire cutters today. Pardon me, wire strippers today. So I'm going to have to peel back. Let me bring this up there. You see that copper is what we're going to connect to our female jumper cables. And that's what we're going to strip this jumper cable, and then we're going to put it up to here. And that connects to the GPIO. So we can make this pretty complex, but here's how I did it. I cut a small section of cable, and I stripped the ends to make use of that copper, as I had mentioned. And then here's the female jumper cable. Now there's a little bit of cable coming out from this, and what I did is I cut here. And I peeled this back a bit. You sort of kind of see that. I don't have the camera built out for these tiny little parts today. Then I apologize. I know you know people that are photography and camera experts, and I feel judged. But thank you, sir. But we're going to peel this back a little bit as well. So what we'll end up doing is taking the copper from here and the copper from here and putting them together, and that will, as I mentioned before, act as our GPIO-based antenna. So you actually can solder this connection. After I peeled everything back, this is kind of what I got. And you can tell I actually had too many wires coming from this cable, so I bent back these and then took that cable there. But you can solder this connection, so it's permanently soldered. And you can also, if you want to reinforce it, you can use like heat resistant tubing or whatever to kind of melt around it. I think that's a bit of overkill for this. You don't really need to solder it. The whole issue is let's get this up and working, and then you can refine your antenna later. But that's the first bit of this we need to do is we're going to strip back this cable, and then we're going to take this antenna and go from there. So I'm going to try and do this in about 30 seconds, and if I can't, we'll move on. But for me, the antenna was the hardest part, and since I spent so much time on it the other evening, I want to see if I can do a speed version to redeem myself in my own eyes. Okay, so I kind of did a bit of a of all the weeks to cut my nails are the weeks that I'm stripping very, very small amounts of cable from a very, very small piece of tubing. So now I'm cutting this down. Again, if I had a wire cutter, I could just a cable stripper, I can just cut this right down. But I need to have enough of an end to wrap around the antenna. Trimming down this cable is a lot easier, even with household scissors, because there's a whole lot of cable here. And again, if you're working with sharp objects, obviously, please be very, very careful. Take time, be very patient. What I've done here is I've taken just household scissors and kind of dragged that along there to expose that wiring, and now I'm going to, in the ultimate show of boredom, just kind of pick at it with my nails here until I finally get to the point where I can kind of pull back the cable. And that's what we're looking for to build our antenna out. I just realized I should have delegated some of this pointless cable stripping to you guys. Why do I get to have all the fun sitting here? But yeah, so this is the start of our antenna here, and again, as I showed you this little section here, this is the female jumper with the copper cable coming out of it. I'm going to move this down a bit more so you can see that little tiny bit of copper there, which probably isn't showing up the camera too well. So that I can just wrap it around this bit, and that'll be the cable. So let me do that really quickly. I'm not kidding. It took me so many tries to build the first antenna because I was completely clueless. How about splitting hairs? I'm splitting cables. Okay. All right, so there. Now I have this. I have that much more cable, which is minuscule. You can actually see, but that's enough to wrap around and probably make a functioning antenna. And again, the antenna cable parts and stuff are really easy and really cheap. So you have an electronic supplies part store around you, like for instance, Radio Shack sells all this stuff via part of their Make program. You can head over there and probably just say like, hey, I'm trying to do this, and probably have less of a time kind of jury-rigging it like I'm doing today, but it should work just fine. Now, so I've got this part of the cable, and I have this part of the jumper. Let me go ahead and I'm going to take a few of these away just because I'm not going to be able to wrap the jumper around all these other cables. And now, again, this is a very, very, very basic way to do it, but essentially what I'm doing is kind of, actually in this case, this instance here, I actually went ahead and like did away with all this and just put the cables into the jumper so that they would touch the unit on the GPIO. So let me do that again here, see if that works. So there's two parts of the female jumper cable. There's this part here, this a little bit tiny and rounded, that's actually going to go over the pin, and there's this kind of big broad part here. So what I'm going to do is take this cabling, and this is again my jury-rigged way of doing it. I do not have an EE degree, nor am I a doctor, nor do I play one on the internet. But I'm just going to see if I can make this connect and work. Okay, so I'm taking these bits of cable, and after I've yanked out the cable from the jumper cable, I'm putting this inside of that part. And we get to do some computer programming. Yeah! So there's some Python happening in a few minutes, everybody.
Crazy.
I know, like watching somebody build cables out of frame. The excitement. You can hear schools closing all over the world to watch this. All right. So that's kind of the end result. You see, I just took these little cables and put them into the jumper. Again, this is a very, very quick way of doing this. It's probably not the recommended way, but you can always build a better antenna. The idea is let's get the basic concept working. So there's an antenna for you, Victor. Here's one thing that I noted. I'll show you how to apply it later. This is my case. I had to strip my case out of this, but we're putting this on GPIO number 4, which from the top down, 1, 2, 3, 4. I should probably put that in the camera. That'd be a good idea. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the left side. So that's the. So this is facing my left, but the interior side on that's what I have going on there. But you have that. You got that new fancy. Wow, it's a lot more GPIOs on that one.
Yeah.
So that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. So that one there, I believe, on the left side. Yeah. So that should be enough to function as the antenna.
Floating hat.
Being attacked by a Raspberry Pi wielding maniac. And that's building up the antenna, which is, as you can see, a glorious and fanciful process. So now we're going to get into the heavy stuff, which again we mentioned for the sake of time we're not going to be actually able to do live. Are you formatting your card now, actually?
No, I've already done.
Oh, you already formatted your card as well. So we're both doing the cooking show route of preparing everything and then kind of breaking it down. But essentially, flashing the SD card allows us to add the image to this card. And to do this, first you'll need to download the image of the OS for the Raspberry Pi Radio from makezine.com, which I will include a link to in the show notes as well as on our page in Pursuitery. And you can check out all those links and get the download going. The download does take a while, though. I think it's about, is it 2.7 or 3.7 gigs, Victor?
Yeah, about 3 something.
Yeah. So,
yeah, it takes some time.
A little bit of time. With that, as we noted, the 3.7 gigs or so, I recommend getting an SD card, 8 gigs at least, just because you're going to put some music on your Raspberry Pi so you can listen to it. To flash the card itself, I downloaded PiFiller. which I'll link as well. PyFiller, as I already mentioned, makes it really simple to walk through the process of repairing the SD card. So you download and extract the ISO or the image from the zip file that you download, and then you just have to start at PyFiller and keep your card handy. It actually works you through the process all the way. That's why I was impressed by it. You know, they want you to make sure that you know that you're going to need it's the FCC again, that you're going to need a blank SD card, and you don't want to write over anything important, obviously. Why I didn't do this in my example with the command line and whatnot is because, A, I'm not as technical as some people. I believe, Victor, you used the command line?
Yeah, I used like the DD command.
Yeah, the DD?
The DD.
The DD command. I don't have that much grasp of it. Actually, I was worried and time compressed, so I didn't use the command line, and I'm a neophyte, and I'm okay with that. I just used PyFiller because it was very hard to mess up, and that's why I like noobs for the same reason as well. So let's go ahead and get the card ready. As you work through the tutorial, you'll open up PyFiller. You have your blank SD card, and you open up PyFiller if you're on a Mac, and it works you through the process. And it will prompt you, and you format the card, and then you'll select the image, and you just drag that over, and it'll prepare the card for you. And when that's over, you can move on to step 3, which is one of my favorite parts, adding music, because you're going to need to add music to turn your Pi into a radio, or broadcast, or spoken word, maybe a little jazz, possibly noises of snoring, so you can confuse your roommates. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with this. This is a artist's dream right here. I've got so many great radio broadcast ideas I want to do. As I move into my new house next week and plan on confusing the neighbors. We just found the screenshot image of what this geek out's going to be on YouTube. That awful face I just made. So now the card's ready. We need to add music. With the card in your computer's SD slot, we're going to see that and click on it, and you'll see another section appear that says Pirate Radio. I'll have some screenshots up for this as well. From the guide, it states, to add music, simply add your artist or album folders to the root. Is root a fancy way of saying home directory?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
yeah. Again, it's a neophyte question for me, but I'm asking two of our tech geniuses who are sitting in today.
You don't put it in subfolder.
Yeah,
it's right
in top level directory.
So I'm quoting Ben off camera from this. It just means you're putting in your top level directory, so it's not a subfolder. It's not going into a subfolder.
Right on camera.
Thank you. And I would like to note that I said I'm quoting you, and then I immediately abridged you with what Victor said. I'll do a grammar geek out later, I promise, on veracity of language, as it were. But so we're going to just drag music over to this and into the Pirate Radio partition. And I believe you can use a variety of files, including MP3, which I use, and I think you can even broadcast with FLAC, F-L-A-C, for lossless audio. So if you're on an audio file, get excited. So I just add some MP3 files by dragging them over to the Pirate Radio partition, and there we go. So now that we're in step 4, and this is where it gets a little more interesting, at least in my mind, because I'm going to ask a whole bunch of tech questions to the geniuses sitting to my left. Off camera, I should add. I have to suffer through this alone. I just hear you guys giggling over me for the whole course of this hour. Keep that same window open, and we're going to configure the Pirate Radio.config file. Now, essentially, this is going to be the file that acts as a mother brain. Please, this is not the actual comp sci stuff happening, but I'm just my interpretation of it. That acts as the controller for what the Pi is going to do when you get your Raspberry Pi Radio up and running. I used Text Wrangler on my Mac to edit this file. I think perhaps.
Yeah, any basic text editor should do.
Yeah. And any basic text editor can knock it out. But you'll see the following options: Pirate Radio frequency. That's where you set your frequency. I set the frequency of this particular Pi on this card to 90.5 FM. In a couple minutes, we'll find out if that was a good decision or not, because I hadn't had a chance to check the broadcast waves in Santa Monica, where we're broadcasting from Pursuitery's lovely new world headquarters-sized boardroom. Hello, hello! people just sitting up here passing by the window wondering what we're doing. We're having a time. That's what we're doing. And so I set that to 90.5, and again, you're just entering text here. It's not a big thing at all. You'll have under that a shuffle option, which is going to either play files alphabetically or not, from what I understand. You'll have a repeat all function, and you can set those values to true or false. Repeat all will repeat them, and there's also an option for stereo playback, which is really cool that you can broadcast stereo FM files from your Raspberry Pi. And then it's just a question of saving it, and we'll fix the frequency here. We'll use our radio scan around and find an open frequency again. Be very fastidious. That means cautious. Well, in this sense, it means cautious of not interrupting with emergency broadcasts, radio waves, or anything important. Just find an open channel and you'll use that. Again, you're not going to have a whole lot of broadcast power with this. You see how small the antenna is and whatnot, but you do have to obey the rules because that's how it works. And then just save the file there, and it'll again be writing to the disk, and you can eject the SD card, and now we can move into the crazy wow part and get the file going, get the card up. So, are you going to go with yours? Do you need a power unit or anything?
I need power, but
I've got there's that white box there that everybody can see at home as I point over. Yeah, that actually has a power unit in there.
Where is the white box?
Yeah, I think that puts out 1.5 amps, which is going to be enough to. Again, this is going into the micro USB adapter here. That's why Android phone users are really lucky. They can just go ahead and charge things. You may be. I don't know if we have a drop immediately here, but yeah, we can mess around with it. But so now is where we set up the Pi, and we discuss what the GPIO does and how that works. We're going to have to attach a power unit to get the Pi on, and I have my power unit. As I dip below here to get this ready, my power unit's okay, barely see it. It's kind of had to cheat the shot today a bit. Actually, guys, I'm going to go ahead and do a geek out first. Let's push the table. I'm going to push the table a little back, which might help if I was not in a rolling chair. Okay, there we go. Thank you so very much, guys. And so this is going to run into the Pi and provides power. Now, I've actually got this Pi. This Pi is not, as you'll note, connected via Ethernet. One thing about this that's really interesting that I suggest people learn about, and one of my favorite things about the Raspberry Pi in general, is it behooves you to learn more about how the command line functions, which is really cool, and get you into the Linux Unix world a bit. And when you wire into the Ethernet, you can use SSH to control the Pi and its settings, and to edit hire.config, and to also run this. There's some files via Python that affects this. They're all in the documentation you can see, and that's one of my favorite things about the Pi, as I mentioned. But unfortunately today we don't have that option, so we're just going to let it run. It's also very important, and it's one of the things that's missing from one of the tutorials, at least in my opinion, is being able to run shutdown, which is the command you use to shut down your Pi. They didn't mention actually to turn it off, so I kept letting my Pi run all the way through, and then kind of like sheepishly unplugging it, hoping that I wasn't destroying it. If you are wired in, this is the important part later, and you don't know your Pi's IP address, you can just log into your router and see what's connected. That's how I actually found my Pi's IP address last night. And the one that's not your computer, which you can check via going to like whatismyipaddress.com or some of those sites, the one that's not your computer, that's probably your Raspberry Pi, if it's not your phone. So now we have the card flashed, and I'm going to insert this into the Raspberry Pi. So you always notice that it's typically labeled out with the SD card. I don't know how the mini SD card does it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not plugged in. I was making sure you weren't plugged in. The last thing I do is plug in. Victor's a very smart man. He's got this psychic ability to guess my moves or read the script that I printed out. So we got the card flash inserted in the Pi. We have the antenna attached to GPIO number 4 on the, well, it's my left-hand side now, but now it's my right-hand side. Right there, you can see what's going on there. It's the fourth one down from, fourth one up from the card, or fourth one down, depending. And let's see what else we have here. And let's go ahead and power up the Pi. We've got our radio ready. I'm going to turn this radio on. I hope it's not going to be a feedback festival. I'm going to move it away from the mic just in case. It's a really cool shortwave radio that one of our engineers lent us today. So thank you very much, Scott, if you're watching this from home and critiquing everything I do as far as technical information, because you're kind of a genius that way. We've been trying not to laugh.
I'll let it out.
Don't let that emotion go. Don't let that emotion go out. And I would like to note that I think we actually have found the most kind of unintriguing background we have had for any Geek Out. It's like and it's like levels of white screens. There's actually a white screen behind that white screen. Then there's a white wall behind that. So I had set, as we noted earlier, had set my Geek Out radio frequency to 90.5 FM. Very lightly. Oh, and I'm competing with KCRW, aren't I? But I'm gonna just keep this.
Listen, Mitchell.
The Pi powered up. So now I'm going to actually go ahead and I've got the cards in there as we've noted, and my power unit ready to go. So I'm going to plug my Pi in and let's see if it broadcasts again. What the important thing we need to check here, this may be off screen, is that these lights are going to go up. On the lower left of this model, you have ACT power. You have the link. And going down, and the thing that you want to see is this top one, ACT flashing green. That means that the system is reading from this card. So let's much ado about nothing and get going here. Trying to hold this up. Unfortunately, I'm off camera for this, but it's the important part. So forgive my rudeness, watchers. Okay, so. It's going to take 15 seconds after plugging in your Pirate Radio, oh, the ACT light's on, to actually be able to have it start broadcasting. So now let's tune my radio a bit.
This vapid power in your car.
Yeah, I actually am transmitting. But I have to find the transmission signal now. And we're live.
Yeah! Alright!
Okay.
What is that track?
This is, I believe, this is Laserhawk. Laserhawk, if you're out there on Twitter, we love you. I'm going to send this to you this video later, but this is, I think it's King of the Streets by Laserhawk, which is awesome. So, as you've seen, I've got my Raspberry Pi built out, and acts as an FM transmitter, and it's actually a little bit powerful. Can I get a volunteer to see like how far you can go? And like it's a big room.
I think I saw it.
Yeah, would you like to go down the stairs and see how far? This massive room. Like I can't. I'm trying to move the camera to see him. Ben's dancing in front of the window. Everybody. It's times like this that I wish I had a more powerful camera. He's running down the stairs with the Raspberry Pirate radio. We're watching our coworkers pass by. Oh, goodness. So yeah, it's the power of a Siri. And again, I'm going to bring this in here. Howard, if you're watching, I'm so jealous of your advanced technology. But you can see the red LEDs provide the power, and the one on top, the one to my right of it, which is labeled ACT, is putting out a little blink here and there because it's still reading the file. It's I think it's flashing a little bit of green, but yeah, that should do it. And hopefully Ben is downstairs jumping up and down to celebrate the fact that the Raspberry Pi FM radio works. So there you have it. Did you want to take a crack at yours, or?
Cool. I mean, I'll try powering it on. I don't know. We don't have a test subject here.
Oh, you don't have any music on it?
Huh?
You have any music on it?
I do. Oh, okay.
We're trying to find where Ben went. Ben has it still worked? How far do you get?
It was all the way to the front door, and then we still lost them, and then on the next side it wasn't working so well. But it was like for the whole building it was working. Nice.
Can we turn it down a bit so we? All right. We're again. I was trying to flip the camera so you saw it. Ran all the way to the front door of our building here at Pursuery World Head. I'm so excited I can't talk, which happens every Geek Out. I got all the way to the front downstairs doors of Pursuery World Headquarters here in Santa Monica, California, and broadcast. And now Victor's trying to power up his.
Yeah, I have mine's on the what is this default frequency on the file, which is 88.9.
88.9. Let's try and.
Yeah.
Let's tune me out and tune Victor in to 88.9. Is that what
I have some like old school jazz music on there. Let's see. What's some old school jazz?
Okay, so we're gonna use the. This is a really cool radio. I really like this. 88.9. So one of our more exciting geek outs, watching us tune a radio. So we're going down to 88.9.
I didn't test if there was any like what is this?
You didn't check to see if you were going to broadcast over
Yeah,
time.
I might have to do it broadcasting over something else. Oh.
Yeah! Alright! Yeah!
2 for 2.
Awesome. Music from the Sweet Era. Artie Shaw.
Artie Shaw, ladies and gentlemen. So that is going to do it. We are 2 for 2 with Raspberry Pirate Radio Geek Outs. Thank you so very much for joining us today. It was kind of a extemporaneously conducted Geek Out, aside from reading the script just because we want to see how it went, but we changed some things up from the tutorial, and it's all online at pursuery.com. You can tweet us, as you see, at pursuery. Big thanks to Victor for joining us and helping out today, and off-screen Ben, dude, that's going to be feedback if you're just like putting it right to the mic. I'm just going to tell you, it's going to deafen everybody, but thanks so much for helping out, and again, you can check out this video and the rest of our videos on our YouTube channel and at our page at pursuery.com. Thanks so very much for joining us. On behalf of myself and the rest of the Pursuery team, thank you, good day, have fun, go mess around with your Raspberry Pi radio. Let's catch it.